Hello everybody, how are y'all? Doing all right? Come on, a little enthusiasm. Y'all doing good? Okay. Hey, so I just wanted to come in today and share a little segment of some of my books. I wrote a 4-book series. I spent 6 years, I worked deep undercover in the government. And during that time, I did anything from work local level, buying dope off of cop killers, all the way up to Mexican cartels. Okay, I used to be a former special agent with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, and so I've seen a different array of things, and the deadly violence that follows with drug dealing at the local level is something people don't think about, and it always goes much further. And so I'm going to share one story with y'all, a short story, and my first book. This is it's called A NARC'S TALE. NARC stands for Narcotics Investigator Undercover. This is my first book. My first book covers my time working undercover for the Greenville City Police Department. I was a young police officer, went to go work there. From day one, they took me out of orientation and put me undercover. And that's all I did for about a year there. And then I subsequently went in books 2 and 3. I worked undercover for the Greenville County Sheriff's Office for 3 years, and then in book 4, I was a special agent with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration based in Kansas, and traveled all over the United States and to Mexico and places like that, working undercover narcotics cases. So I hope y'all enjoy. This is just one of many. If you like these type of short stories, everything in this book is true. I didn't sugarcoat anything, so bear with me a little bit. I was just like y'all one day. I didn't plan on being an author. I didn't plan on writing any books. I just had some pretty exciting things that occurred in my life, and I felt like I wanted to share the story more for my kids so they would know. I got 3 teenagers and one that's 6 years old. I wanted them to know one day, where Daddy was, especially for those 6 years. And like Officer Sharpton said, I spent another 6 years overseas. I lived in Africa for 2 years policing there. In Liberia, I policed in Haiti. Very deadly place there with the gangs there and the SWAT team. Then I did 2 years in Afghanistan. So I feel really blessed. And all that's in my books, and it kind of explains all that and how there's almost always a drug nexus to all types of crimes in some way, shape, or form. Let me go ahead and share with y'all. This story right here is called Confidential Informant Gets Jacked. Okay, so anybody know what a confidential informant is? Somebody who decides to cooperate with the police and work with the police. So this is my story on that. On this specific occasion, one of the other narcs in the unit had developed an informant from a recent cocaine bust. The confidential informant, or CI, was only busted with a small user amount of cocaine. Still, he decided to cooperate and work with us as an informant so he could try to keep his record clear of any drug convictions, especially a felony drug conviction. This informant stated that he usually purchased user amounts of drugs in some of the different nightclubs with which I was very familiar at the time. This is how I became involved in the case. The arresting narcotics investigator set up a meeting to introduce me to the CI. After meeting and speaking with the CI said he felt at ease. He was willing to take me into the clubs with him and introduce me to some of the key players in the drug game. The informant was a small-framed Asian male who I'm going to refer to as John for the sake of this story. After some planning and a couple of days spent briefing John, we arranged to go out to one of the local clubs that I had never been to before. I knew about this specific club but had not gotten the opportunity to go inside of there yet. John frequented this location and was a familiar face to the club security, their bouncers, and the local dealers in the club, making him my perfect in for that location. I briefed John before going in on how I expected him to handle himself when I'm working undercover with him. I made it clear that I wanted him to hook me up with the dealers, that he could not be involved in the actual hand-to-hand transactions. I told him this was to ensure that I was the one who had to go to court and testify, rather than him, who might be hard to reach when the case went to trial down the road. So, if he did the introduction and I made the actual drug deal with the suspect, John would not have to come into court and testify. This was a tactic that was preferred to use with CIs, although they are needed in some situations. They were still involved in the criminal underworld and somewhat untrustworthy in the courts. Not to mention the credibility and testimony of an undercover narcotics investigator holds more weight than that of a confidential informant. I also had a duty to protect the identity of the CI if we could in this situation. The informant's involvement in the criminal underworld gives them the level of untrustworthiness and no loyalty to test beyond working off their original charges. The probability of convincing everyone in the jury beyond a reasonable doubt with just a CI's word is pretty low in court. If an undercover knows how to articulate things properly and has proven himself or herself reliable in the past, then the probability of conviction is very high. This operation was before the current times, where everyone expects to see video evidence and the mere testimony of an officer is not always enough in court. We drove out to one of the nightclubs around midnight. This specific club was an old bowling alley converted into a nightclub. It was a large club that held about 1,000 people on each of the two sides. There was a homosexual side on the right, and there was a straight club on the left. We decided to go into the area on the left, but were willing to go to the other side if we could not find any prospective drug targets inside of the first location. We went out to this club with a 2-person surveillance team following us. I did not wear concealed body wire because of the high noise and touchy-feely environment inside of these clubs, which went hand in hand with the ecstasy use crowd. We thought the wire might be revealed in that environment, and the audio recording would not be legible after the fact because all the background noise in the music. We decided to put a wire on the CI instead. We did this for safety reasons. In this case, in case he got separated from me. We also did it so he thought we were listening to his every word, even though they really cannot make out everything with the music and all the background noise inside the nightclub. The mere fact that he thought law enforcement was listening might have been a deterrent if he thought about doing something stupid in the club. Before entering, we had to wait in line that extended out the entrance of the club. While standing in line, I talked with some of the customers standing in front of us. To my delight, they asked us, "You looking for anything?" Of course, they were referring to drugs. They did this without us even bringing up drugs in the conversation. That was a pleasant surprise to me working undercover, so I replied with, "You got any X?" referencing ecstasy. They said that they did. I asked them what kind they had and how much. They said they had triple stack Nike swooshes, about $30 a pop. I told one of the guys that I could get 2 for $50 if he agreed to the discount for buying more than one. He agreed to the price and we did the exchange while waiting in line to get into the club. I slipped both pills into my pocket and acted like I threw one of the pills into my mouth. I pretended to be chewing the pill and acted like I swallowed it. Chewing up the ecstasy pills and swallowing them makes the high come on quicker and stronger initially. This gives one a rush-like feeling versus just swallowing the pill, which may take approximately 30 minutes before the person starts to feel the effects. The night started well, and we hadn't even entered the club yet. We continued to wait in line, eventually paid our cover charge, and went inside. Once inside, John introduced me to another dealer that he knew. The CI told the dealer that I was looking for something, referencing ecstasy. This guy thought he was too slick to be caught, so he told me that he was going to put the pills in a napkin, throw them in the corner of the room, and he asked that I go get the napkin, then fold the money up, put it inside the napkin, separate the napkin in a separate napkin, and put it back in the same location in the corner of the room. We agreed to the price of $30 each pill for 2 pills. The price, of course, was a little bit high, but it was apparent he was not going to budge on the price when I tried to get a better deal from him. Beggars cannot be choosers in this situation, and I did not want to turn down a potential drug deal on a new target. It was not my money I was spending. I watched the dealer walk over to the corner and put a crumpled up napkin down. After doing so, he walked away. I looked around and it was clear. I walked over and casually picked up the small parcel. I opened it up and made sure that the pill was not fake and that they were both inside of there. I took my $60 out and folded it up and put it in another napkin and dropped it in the corner and walked away. I stood back at the location where I could observe him, retrieve it, and he sat down at a table with several other people. I watched him pull the money out to confirm that it was the correct amount. He then handed the money off to another guy that was sitting at the table. This told me who was likely the bigger fish. It is small little transactions like this that are funny to me. What made it hilarious was this guy believed that he could not be busted if he did not physically hand me the drugs. He thought that the way he did it was not classified as a distribution under the definition of the law. Little did he know that he was just as guilty either way he did the transaction. Also, by him handing the drug money over to the other guy immediately after the deal, we were able to identify another player in the drug gang and someone else that could be charged with aiding in the drug transaction. My surveillance team was notified of the hand-to-hand and we handed off the suspect to them. They waited until he left the club and identified him in an unrelated traffic stop. So far, so good. We had 2 dope deals and the informant had not touched any of the drugs or the money. I notified my surveillance team of a transaction of all 3 of the suspects from the 2 separate deals. After the second transaction, I started to talk with another group of people when John went to go use the restroom. After a few minutes, he had not come back. I began to wonder where he was. About 5 more minutes went by, so I decided to go to the bathroom to look for him. I looked at all the stalls. I could not find him. At first, I thought he might have gotten cold feet and took off for the night. The problem was that he was wearing an expensive body wire and I was still responsible for him until we released him for the night. I walked around the club and I still could not find him. I notified my surveillance team on the phone and they told me that John had not exited the club because they had not seen him come out of the main entrance, which they were running surveillance. I walked up the long, dark hallway towards the front door to check everywhere, every place he could be. Then I noticed 2 male subjects had someone pinned in the corner. They appeared to be giving the person a hard time. As I got a little closer, I could see it was John. I could see one of the guys standing with his body turned to the side and he had something shiny in his hand. I also noticed the other guy was going through the informant's pockets. As I stepped closer, I could see the object was a gun. And that I just walked up on an armed robbery of my informant, who I was sworn to protect. Not wanting to blow my cover or let the situation further escalate, I had to make a split-second decision. I rushed in and punched one of the subjects in the side of the head. This blow knocked him to the ground. I threw the other guy out of the way, causing him to trip over his buddy already laying on the ground. I grabbed John and we ran out the club to our vehicle, which was parked in the back hidden area of the parking lot, not visible from the front of the nightclub. My phone started ringing as soon as I sat down in the driver's seat. It was my surveillance team asking me what in the hell just happened. Since they saw us come sprinting out the door of the nightclub, I told them that my informant was being robbed and I had to get him out of there. I let them know that one of the guys had a handgun and I have his description. I drove my vehicle around the parking lot as I talked on the phone and parked where I had a visual on the front entrance of the nightclub. Nobody was able to see us since all my windows were tinted, including my front windshield. I told the surveillance team that the 2 males standing out front were the same ones who tried to rob my informant when I intervened. I noticed that one guy helped his buddy who limped and stumbled out of the club. I guess he was knocked out for a bit after I had punched him and was still dizzy while his friend escorted him out. They walked to a white, newer model Honda Accord with nice rims on it and proceeded to drive out of the parking lot. At my request, a surveillance unit followed them as they left. Once they got several miles away from the nightclub, a uniformed patrol officer had probable cause for a traffic stop. The officer was not told any of the details other than they might have a gun, and we needed them to positively be identified. We needed to let the officer know this much information for officer safety issues. Most officers who get a call from the Vice Narcotics Unit to stop a car know that there must be drugs or some other felony involved. So at a minimum, the officers usually positively identified the vehicle's occupants to help our investigation. Under ideal circumstances, a uniformed officer independently finds probable cause and makes an arrest. If they can develop their own probable cause, the undercover officer's identity and the undercover investigation are not revealed to the suspects. In this situation, the officer observed an infraction and stopped the driver for a failure to use his turn signal. After a brief conversation, the officer discovered that the driver did not have a valid South Carolina driver's license. So he was placed in handcuffs for driving without a license. When searching the front of the car, the officer found a handgun, a silver semi-automatic located underneath the passenger side seat. This was the seat where the subject was sitting who attempted to rob my informant and the same guy knocked out. The passenger was then asked to exit the vehicle and patted down for weapons. Of course, the driver immediately claimed that it was not his car and he did not know about the gun. This lie fell on deaf ears when the officer found a 9mm bullet, the same caliber as a handgun, located in his front pants pocket. After a further search of the vehicle, a small amount of ecstasy and cocaine were found. These drugs were found in an area that was accessible to both the driver and the passenger, but nobody claimed them. So the passenger was also placed under arrest. The officer took both subjects down to the county jail and charged them with the following offenses. No driver's license was charged to the driver only. Unlawful possession of a firearm, driver only. Possession of ecstasy and possession with intent to distribute cocaine. Due to the amount of the cocaine, which was over 28 grams, both suspects were charged. We never had the officer charge them with the attempted armed robbery because both subsequently pled guilty and went to prison on the above charges. In addition, this saved face for our informant, and he was not compromised as working for us. We remained in the parking lot of the nightclub while the above traffic stop occurred for about 2 additional hours. We still had to identify the 3 other guys from which I had made drug purchases on earlier in the evening. Eventually, all 3 of them exited the club at different times. We had them stopped and identified by uniformed patrol officers, just the same as we did in the situation with the armed robbers. The only difference was that these people were just identified and cut loose with a traffic citation or a warning. They were all arrested and charged with ecstasy distribution during a roundup at the end of this operation. Again, arresting people months or years later allows us to continue operations without exposing the identity of an undercover investigator or drawing suspicion upon him that may put him in harm's way. So that's just a short story, one of hundreds and hundreds of drug deals that I was involved in. But I'm going to tell you a little case conclusion. It's only a minute long. This was part of a much larger operation called Operation Lights Out, and this was the case conclusion. Operation Lights Out resulted in undercover buys from over 45 different drug dealers. This operation led to making undercover purchases from drug dealers in various cities throughout South Carolina. This specific case was in Greenville that I just told you about, and into Atlanta, Georgia, and Charlotte, North Carolina. The different types of drugs seized were ecstasy, MDMA, cocaine, marijuana, methamphetamines, ice, they called it then, ketamine, Special K, GHB, and numerous other prescription drugs. One of the scariest things about this case was out of the 47 times that I intended to purchase ecstasy undercover, it only tested positive for pure MDMA or ecstasy 1 time. All the other times the drugs were packaged and laced with anything but ecstasy: heroin, methamphetamine, Rohypnol, also known as a date rape drug, cocaine, and caffeine. This contributes to the vast amount of drug overdoses or problems with people purchasing or using what they think is supposed to be ecstasy in rave parties and clubs. As a result of the 4-month undercover operation, I received a commendation letter for my undercover work. Then it has pictures throughout the book. There's a ton of pictures in here. Newspaper articles, what we looked like working undercover at the different times, some of the suspects in the case. So, anybody got any questions about that story? Just goes to show you right now, the message in that story is 47 times I brought ecstasy. Thought I was buying ecstasy from a street level drug dealer. 1 time was it ecstasy. That's what we're seeing on the streets now. Kids buying marijuana, buying illegal drugs. They lace it with fentanyl, they die. That's a common occurrence right now.
We're going to check the other rooms.
All right. Yeah, see if we have any questions.
Teachers, do we have any questions from the other rooms?
Well. Anybody got any questions? I know I didn't answer all of them. It's just a short story. Anybody want to be a police officer when they get older? Anybody want to work undercover narcotics? It's tough. It's crazy and it's tough. You see a lot of bad, nasty things. Well, I'll tell you this, the funny thing about that is everybody thinks people don't snitch. I don't know anybody who don't snitch.
You never come down to it and they drug
Yeah.
case. He did.
Well, yeah. When somebody's looking at life in prison, they're going to talk.
You snitched almost definitely.
And I've seen cases where people were so tied up in with the cartels where the cartels bonded them out, they never snitched and they cut their heads off in 24 hours.
Oh, yeah.
So you want to get in the game, it results in nasty stuff.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
What gen that is on your hip right now? Facts.
This is, I think this is a new, is this one of the newer, or it's either a 4 or 5?
Gotta be gen.
Yeah, it's 4 or 5.
Too nice of it.
Oh, I can't pull out my gun. We can't do that. Definitely not going to do that. So, anybody got any questions about drugs, about anything we do as police officers, or anything? You get good grades. You graduate from high school. Go to school when you turn 21. If you get an education geared towards criminal justice, and you come up there and you go through all the training, this man back here is a firearms instructor. He's a pretty deadly shot. Don't let him fool you now. He can shoot.
All right, so you can shoot. I know you got a gen. I said, well, you look. That's not like a gen. But we still going with it?
You can't talk to Chief and then pulling this out.
I don't want to decide it. That's definitely like a gen 2, gen 3. That's an old gun.
All right.
It's futuristic over there.
Yeah, this is called alien gear. It's funny you say that. Yeah, this was something we were testing out a holster. So, yeah.
I need that. I need that. Me and the bros will go crazy with that. I'm telling you.
Just say, don't be too loud and let you know.
I'm already knowing.
All right. Well, thank y'all. Appreciate y'all having me.
Chief, we appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
Y'all